This 17-year-old had no idea he was about to help one of the richest men in America. And what that billionaire did to thank him will completely blow your mind. I'm talking about a reward so life-changing that it didn't just transform this kid's future. It transformed an entire community. 30 a.m. on a busy highway outside Dayton. Rush hour chaos. That's when Caleb Turner, a 17-year-old riding his bike, spotted trouble. A sharply dressed older man stood helplessly beside his luxury BMW with a flat tire. No clue how to fix it. Panic written all over his face. Here's where it gets interesting. Caleb was already running late for the most important exam of his life. But what he chose to do next changed everything. And when you hear who this stranger really was, well, the story will floor you. But to understand why Caleb's decision was so costly, you need to know what this morning meant to him. And when you learn about the sacrifices he was already making, what he did next will hit even harder. Meet Caleb Turner. 17 years old, a senior at Westbrook High School, and carrying more responsibility than most adults. Every morning at 5 a.m., while his classmates were still sleeping, Caleb was already on his bike. 50 houses, 50 newspapers, $3 a day. It wasn't much, but every penny mattered. You see, Caleb didn't live the life most teenagers did. No new video games, no weekends at the mall, no asking his grandmother for lunch money. He lived with her. Margaret Turner, age 72. She had raised him since he was 8. After his parents' marriage collapsed and left him with nowhere stable to go, Margaret had spent 30 years working in a cafeteria before arthritis forced her into early retirement. Now she survived on Social Security, $650 a month. That was it. Their little rental house told the story. Peeling paint, a leaky roof patched with buckets in 3 different rooms. Winters were spent in layers of sweaters because the heating bill was impossible to keep up with. Margaret's medicine often cost more than their groceries. Caleb had seen her count pills like they were gold coins, sometimes skipping doses just to make them last longer. That's why Caleb worked 3 jobs. After his newspaper route, he biked to school. Not because he had to. The bus ran his way. But every gallon of gas saved meant more money for groceries. At school, Caleb held a 3.8 GPA. His teachers admired him, his classmates respected him. But while they were planning weekend parties, Caleb was planning his next shift. After school, he tutored younger kids at the library. $5 an hour. It wasn't much, but those kids needed help, and Caleb needed the cash. Then at 6 in the evening, he biked across town to Romano's Italian kitchen, where he worked as a dishwasher until 11. He came home exhausted, then stayed up finishing homework by the dim light of a desk lamp. The ceiling fixture in his bedroom had burned out months ago, but they couldn't afford to replace it. And here's what made Caleb different. He never complained, never pitied himself, because Margaret had taught him something he carried like armor. We may not have much money, Caleb, but we are rich in faith, and faith is something nobody can take away from you. Caleb wore a small silver cross on a chain, a gift from Margaret when he turned 15. He never took it off. On Sundays, no matter how tired he was, he sat with her in the second pew of their small church, listening to hymns, bowing his head in prayer. His dream was bigger than himself, Ohio State University's engineering program. His grades proved he was capable, but grades alone didn't pay tuition. That's why he had been pouring himself into a scholarship application. The essay question: describe a challenge that shaped your character. He'd written 17 drafts, tearing each one apart. How do you write about being poor without sounding like you're begging? How do you turn struggle into inspiration without making it sound rehearsed? The deadline? Today, 4:00 p.m., but that wasn't the only weight pressing down on him this morning. Today was his final chemistry exam, 30% of his grade. No makeup tests, no exceptions. His teacher, Ms. Grant, had been clear about that since day 1. This exam would determine if Caleb qualified for Ohio State's pre-engineering track. Without it, the scholarship meant nothing. Ms. Grant believed in him. She had written recommendation letters, stayed late to help him study, even bought him a scientific calculator with her own money when she realized he couldn't afford one. The whole neighborhood was rooting for Caleb. The Turner's neighbor, Mrs. Lewis, always asked about his grades. Mr. Jackson down the block boasted to everyone about that Turner boy who was going to be somebody. Caleb was the first they believed could break out, the first to make it to college, the first to build a new future. The pressure was immense. Not just for him, but for everyone who believed in him. For Margaret, who stretched her limited income to buy him school supplies. For Ms. Grant, who saw brilliance in him. For the church community that whispered prayers for his success every Sunday. That morning, Caleb woke at 5 a.m. as usual. But Margaret was having a bad arthritis day. Her hands were too swollen to open pill bottles. Her knees ached so badly she could barely stand. Caleb spent 20 minutes helping her, arranging her medication, making breakfast, checking that everything she needed was within reach. "It's what we do for family," he told himself, remembering her words. "Faith without works is dead, Caleb. We take care of each other. That's what family means." But those 20 minutes made him late. And in a life where every second was counted, lateness was a luxury Caleb couldn't afford. He pedaled frantically through Dayton streets, his backpack thudding with every bump. His phone read 7:42 a.m. School started at 7:45. The chemistry exam began exactly at 7:45. Ms. Grant was strict about punctuality. As he pedaled, Caleb's thoughts raced. "I can't be late. I can't miss this exam. Margaret's counting on me. Ms. Grant is counting on me. My whole community is counting on me." His legs pumped harder, the wind slicing through his worn jacket, the cross at his chest bouncing with each frantic push of the pedals. Just 3 more minutes to get to school. 3 more minutes to secure his future. That's when Caleb spotted the BMW with its hazard lights flashing, and everything changed. What happened next would force him to choose between his future and his faith, and what makes this choice so powerful is that he had every reason to keep riding. 7:42 a.m. Through the blur of morning traffic, Caleb's eyes locked on a scene that would alter the course of his life. A luxury BMW sat crippled on the shoulder of Route 35, hazard lights blinking like a frantic SOS. Beside it stood a man in his 60s. Even at a distance, Caleb could tell he was wealthy. The suit looked like it cost more than Caleb could earn in half a year. The watch catching the early sunlight was unmistakably a Rolex. The car itself was worth more than every house on Caleb's street combined. But right now, none of that wealth was helping him. Meet Jonathan Pierce, 62 years old, CEO and founder of one of the Midwest's biggest corporations. Net worth, more than $2 billion. He could buy almost anything, but not a way out of this moment. Jonathan paced back and forth, phone pressed to his ear. "No service," he muttered, glaring at the screen like it had betrayed him. For a man who fixed problems with phone calls and money, this helplessness was foreign. The timing couldn't have been worse. At 8:30 a.m., Jonathan had the most important board meeting of his career, a $50 million decision hanging in the balance. The presentation that would determine the company's expansion was in his briefcase. Without this meeting, the largest development project in Pierce & Co.'s history would collapse. Hundreds of jobs gone. The city's biggest investment in decades, dead. Jonathan checked his Rolex. 7:43 a.m. He had just 47 minutes to get downtown, set up, and persuade 12 board members. And here he was stranded. He tried flagging down cars. A red sedan approached. He waved desperately. The driver glanced at him and sped away. A pickup, same thing. A van full of workers. They averted their eyes. In 10 minutes, more than 20 vehicles had flown by. Not one had stopped. People assumed a well-dressed executive beside a luxury car didn't need help. He'd figure it out. But assumptions didn't change tires. Jonathan popped the trunk. How hard can it be? He thought. He'd built an empire. Surely he could change a tire. But as he pulled out the spare and jack, reality set in. He hadn't done this in 30 years. Maybe longer. The jack looked alien. The lug nuts refused to budge. When he tried to force one, the wrench slipped, and his knuckles scraped hard against the asphalt. Blood smeared across his hand. His expensive suit wrinkled. His hair lost its perfect form. For the first time in decades, Jonathan Pierce felt truly powerless. Meanwhile, Caleb's phone read 7:43. 2 minutes left. 5 minutes of hard biking to school. He could picture Ms. Grant handing out test papers, the exam starting exactly on time, his seat empty. He could imagine his classmates looking around, wondering where he was. This was the moment of truth. Caleb had every reason to keep riding. His future, Ohio State, the scholarship, the dream of engineering, depended on this exam. His grandmother had sacrificed everything for him. The entire neighborhood was counting on him. And this man? Clearly rich. Surely he'd figure something out. Tow truck, driver, assistant. That's what anyone would assume. But then Caleb heard his grandmother's voice in his head. Not from this morning, but from 100 conversations over the years, her words shaped by both hardship and faith. Caleb, faith isn't just the hymns you sing on Sunday. It's what you live when no one's looking. We help people not because of who they are, but because of who we are. That's who you are. He looked at Jonathan struggling with the jack, the frustration, the panic, the raw helplessness of a man used to control, now stranded in a moment where his money was useless. Caleb didn't see a billionaire. He saw someone's father, someone's grandfather, someone who needed help, and Caleb made his choice. He pulled over. His phone read 7:44. With that simple action, he was officially choosing a stranger over his exam. What happened next would prove that sometimes the most life-defining decisions come in the space between logic and compassion. Caleb leaned his bike against the guardrail, every second dragging him farther from his exam. But he didn't hesitate. "Excuse me, sir," Caleb called, jogging toward the BMW. "Looks like you could use a hand with that tire." Jonathan looked up, startled. Here was a teenager, clearly in a rush, stopping to help a stranger. For a moment, an instinctive wariness flickered across his face. A Christian kid with a cross necklace dangling against a worn jacket, offering help on a deserted stretch of highway? Old prejudices whispered caution. But then he saw Caleb's face. Genuine concern, no hidden agenda. Just someone willing to help. "Yes," Jonathan admitted, his voice betraying relief. "I could definitely use the help. I haven't changed a tire in years." "No problem, sir," Caleb said, already crouching down to assess the situation. "Let's take a look." And this was where Caleb's character truly shone. He didn't just help, he took charge. Years of watching his neighbor, Mr. Hanlon, work on old cars had prepared him for this. Caleb quickly found the jack and spare tire, moving with steady confidence. "First step is loosening the lug nuts while the tire's still on the ground," Caleb explained. "Gives you better leverage." Jonathan watched in awe. This 17-year-old was teaching him something he hadn't touched in decades. But more than the skill, it was Caleb's calm under pressure that impressed him. Both of them kept glancing at the time. Jonathan's Rolex, 7:46. Caleb's phone, 7:46. They were both running out of minutes. "Sir, you said you have an important meeting?" Caleb asked as he worked the lug nuts loose. "Board meeting at 8:30. Pretty crucial one, actually," Jonathan admitted. "Don't worry, sir. We'll get you there on time." The confidence in Caleb's voice was striking. Here was a teenager sacrificing his own crucial morning. Yet all his focus was on making sure this stranger didn't suffer. Jonathan found himself studying Caleb more closely. The way he shielded Jonathan's expensive suit from grease stains. How he positioned himself to take on the hardest work. How he explained each step with clarity and respect despite the obvious difference in age and circumstance. "Now I'm going to jack up the car," Caleb said calmly. "Could you step back a bit for safety, sir?" Even under crushing time pressure, safety came first. Margaret's lessons had taken root deep within him. As Caleb worked, Jonathan tried to make conversation. "You seem pretty skilled at this. Work on cars often?" "My neighbor, Mr. Hanlon, taught me," Caleb replied. He always said every person should know how to change a tire, check the oil, and jump a battery. Basic things, so you can help people when they're stuck. "Smart neighbor," Jonathan nodded. "What's your name, son?" "Caleb Turner, sir." "Well, Caleb Turner, I'm Jonathan Pierce. And I have to say, your parents raised you right." Caleb paused only for a moment. "Actually, my grandmother raised me, Margaret Turner. She's the one who taught me to always help when I can." Something stirred in Jonathan's chest. He had been raised by his grandmother, too, after his own parents died young. The parallel didn't escape him. "Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman." "Yes, sir, she is. She always says, 'Faith shows in what you do when no one important is watching.'" The phrase hit Jonathan like a lightning bolt. No one important is watching, except now he knew differently. Someone important was watching. someone who could change this young man's life forever. Caleb continued working, steady and methodical. He removed the flat, positioned the spare, and began threading the lug nuts. "Hand tighten first," he explained, "then use the wrench once it's seated properly. That way it's secure before we lower the jack." Jonathan was amazed at the teenager's composure. Most adults he knew would have panicked. Caleb double-checked every lug nut, confirmed the tire pressure, and carefully stored the damaged tire and tools back in the trunk. Everything neat, organized. "Sir, this spare will get you to your meeting, but you'll want to get the flat repaired soon. It's not just a puncture. The valve stem's going bad." Jonathan blinked. "How did you know that?" "My neighbor always told me look for the root cause, not just the symptom. Saves you from bigger trouble later." 15 minutes later, the BMW was roadworthy. Caleb's hands were blackened with grease, his jacket smudged, but he was smiling. "All set, sir. You should make it with time to spare." Jonathan checked his Rolex. 7:59 a.m. The boy was right. He'd make it downtown in plenty of time, and then came the moment that would change everything. Jonathan reached for his wallet. "Son, I can't thank you enough." "Please, let me pay you for your time." Caleb's response was immediate. "No, sir, that's not necessary. I'm just glad I could help. Please, take something." "Gas money, at least," Jonathan insisted, glancing at Caleb's bicycle mid-sentence and realizing the absurdity. Caleb laughed, the first genuine laugh of the morning. "It's okay, sir, really. Just pay it forward sometime. Pay it forward." The phrase echoed inside Jonathan. When was the last time someone had helped him without expecting anything in return? He tried another approach, pulling a business card from his pocket, but the morning dew had soaked it, smearing the ink. Useless. He shoved it back, frustrated. Then an idea came to him. Jonathan slipped off his college ring, a distinctive gold band with a crimson stone. His Harvard Business School class ring from 1984. It had been on his hand nearly 40 years. "Here," he said, holding it out. "A token of appreciation." Caleb hesitated. The ring looked valuable. "Sir, I couldn't. That means something to you." "It does. That's exactly why I want you to have it. Sometimes important things belong with people who understand their value." Reluctantly, Caleb accepted. Too large for his finger, he looped it onto his keychain beside his house key and the small silver cross Margaret had given him at 15. "Thank you, sir. I'll take good care of it." Jonathan started the BMW. The engine purred back to life. Through the window, he said, "What you did today says everything about who you are, Caleb Turner. Don't ever change that." As the car pulled away, Caleb noticed something that would matter later. The license plate read Pierce 1. Not random numbers, but a vanity plate. The name Pierce tugged at his memory. Where had he heard it before? The BMW disappeared into traffic. Caleb checked his phone. 8:10 a.m. He had officially missed his exam. Yet somehow he didn't regret a single second. When he finally pedaled toward Westbrook High, 25 minutes late, the heavy gold ring bounced against his keys, clinking softly against the small cross at his side. He had no idea yet how much both would change his life. Caleb's phone glowed, 8:10 a.m. The chemistry exam had started 25 minutes ago. By the time he reached Westbrook High, his heart sank. The hallways were eerily silent. Everyone was already in class. Everyone was already taking the test that could define their future. His sneakers squeaked against the polished floor as he hurried toward Ms. Grant's classroom. Through the narrow window in the door, he saw his classmates bent over exam papers, pencils scratching, calculators clicking, futures unfolding. He drew in a shaky breath and knocked softly. Ms. Grant looked up, saw him, and her face shifted, disappointment mixed with concern. She stepped into the hall, closing the door behind her. "Caleb," she said quietly, "you know the policy." "Yes, ma'am. I understand." She studied his face. 15 years of teaching had taught her to read students. This wasn't the boy who skipped class or overslept. This wasn't a kid making excuses. "What happened?" she asked, softer now. "I had to help someone, Ms. Grant, someone who really needed it." She noticed the grease on his jacket, the dirt beneath his fingernails. "Car trouble?" "Not mine, ma'am. Someone else's." And here was what made the moment so powerful. She understood exactly what he meant. She knew Caleb's character. He wouldn't miss this exam unless it was for something that mattered. But policy was policy. Caleb, you know I can't make exceptions. The school board is very clear about finals. I know, ma'am. I'm not asking for one. That stopped her cold. Most students would beg, plead, spin excuses. Caleb didn't. You understand what this means for your Ohio State application? Yes, ma'am. And you're okay with that? Caleb thought about Jonathan Pierce walking into his boardroom at that very moment, able to make it because a teenager had chosen compassion over self-interest. I did the right thing. Ms. Grant, I'd do it again. The hallway was silent, except for the faint scratching of pencils behind classroom doors. Ms. Grant searched his eyes. No regret? No self-pity? Just quiet conviction. Go to the office, she said finally. Explain it to Principal Harding. Maybe there's something we can work out. By that afternoon, the story spread through Westbrook High like wildfire. Caleb Turner, the 3.8 GPA kid everyone believed would be the first to make it out, the one carrying the weight of his church and community's hopes, had missed his chemistry exam because he stopped to help a stranger change a tire. His friend Tyler found him at his locker after school. Dude, are you insane? That was your ticket to Ohio State. Maybe, Caleb said, stuffing textbooks into his backpack. Maybe not. What do you mean, maybe? Your whole scholarship depended on that grade. Then I'll find another way. Tyler stared at him like he was speaking another language. Another way? Caleb, this was the way. This was your shot. Tyler, you ever notice how the people who really make it aren't always the ones who take the safe path? What's that supposed to mean? I don't know yet, but I know I did the right thing today. That evening, Margaret was waiting on the porch when Caleb pedaled up to their little house. One look at his face told her everything. What happened, baby? She asked. He told her the whole story, the stranded motorist, the choice he made, the exam he missed, the consequences he faced. When he finished, she was silent for a long moment. Then she stood, walked over, and wrapped him in the biggest hug of his life. I've never been more proud of you, she whispered. That's my grandson. That's who I raised you to be. But Grandma, the scholarship. Baby, there are lots of ways to get an education, but there's only one way to build character. And you've got that part figured out. That night, Caleb sat at the kitchen table, the lamplight glowing warmly as he opened his laptop. He placed Jonathan's heavy college ring beside his keys and his silver cross. It gleamed, almost daring him to see beyond his fear. He began typing his scholarship essay. The weight of gold. What I learned from a stranger on the highway. For the first time in 17 drafts, the words flowed, because now he knew exactly what shaped his character, and he had no idea that tomorrow everything would change. After dinner, Margaret lingered at the table, her magnifying glass in hand. She studied the engraving inside the ring. Caleb, come look at this, she said. He leaned over her shoulder as she pointed to the tiny inscription inside the band. J.P. Never forget where you came from. J.P., Margaret murmured. Jonathan Pierce. That was his name, right? Yes, ma'am. But there are probably thousands of Pierces in Ohio. She nodded, but something nagged at her. That name sounded familiar. She walked into the living room and returned with yesterday's newspaper. Baby, read this for me. The print's too small. Caleb unfolded the paper and scanned the headlines. Stocks, mergers, earnings reports. Then he froze. Pierce & Comas announces record quarterly profits, he read aloud. Margaret's hand tightened on his arm. What did you just say? Pierce & Co., Caleb repeated. One of the biggest construction and development companies in the Midwest. They looked at each other. Then back at the ring. Could be a coincidence, Caleb muttered. But even he didn't believe it. The next morning, during his tutoring session, little Maria Alvarez pointed to the ring dangling from Caleb's keychain. My daddy's boss has one just like that, she said. Your daddy went to Harvard? Caleb asked, startled. Maria giggled. No, silly. He's a janitor, but he works at the big Pierce building downtown, the one with the giant P on top. Daddy says the man at the top office has a ring exactly like yours. Caleb's heart skipped. The Pierce building? Uh-huh, Maria nodded. Tallest building in the city. Mr. Pierce's office is at the very top. That afternoon, during his shift at Romano's Italian kitchen, Caleb overheard a conversation at table 12 that made his hands shake so badly he nearly spilled a pitcher of water. Pierce's presentation this morning was incredible, one businessman said to another at table 12. The guy saved the quarterly projection single-handedly. How'd he manage that? I heard he was running late for the board meeting. That's the crazy part. He said some kid helped him fix a flat tire. Put him in such a good mood, he nailed the whole thing. Caleb nearly dropped the water pitcher. Pierce is always talking about character and community, the man continued. He said that teenager restored his faith in the next generation. When Caleb got home that evening, Margaret was waiting at the kitchen table with Mrs. Lewis's reading glasses and the business section spread wide. Baby, she said softly, I think we need to talk about that ring. She pointed to a small photo in the newspaper. The image was grainy, but the caption read, Jonathan Pierce, CEO of Pierce & Coers, outlines the company's new community investment strategy. Caleb squinted. The face was blurry but familiar. Grandma, you think? I think, Margaret said slowly, that you might have helped someone very important yesterday. What neither of them knew was that, at that very moment, Jonathan Pierce was in his corner office, 47 floors above downtown Dayton, making a phone call that would change their lives forever. Margaret spread the paper flat, adjusting the borrowed glasses. Caleb, baby, sit down. Her voice carried that serious weight that made him freeze. Look at this article, she said. Pointing. Pierce & Co.'s reports record quarterly profits. Caleb read over her shoulder. Jonathan Pierce, CEO and founder of Pierce & Co., one of the Midwest's largest construction and development firms. Net worth, $2.3 billion. The number hit him like a blow. $2.3 billion, Margaret continued, known for philanthropic work and community projects. Started the company with a single construction crew in 1985, raised by his grandmother after his parents died. The parallel struck Caleb like lightning. He, too, had been raised by his grandmother. Just like you, baby, Margaret whispered. Just like you. Caleb picked up the ring, turning it over in his hand. The inscription, JP, never forget where you came from, suddenly carried an entirely new weight. Grandma, what does this mean? Before she could answer, Caleb's phone buzzed on the table. An unknown number. Dayton area code. They stared at it. Answer it, baby, Margaret whispered. Caleb's hand trembled as he picked it up. Hello? Hello, is this Caleb Turner? The voice was instantly recognizable. Polished, warm, confident. The same voice that had thanked him yesterday morning on Route 35. Caleb's throat went dry. Yes, sir. This is Caleb. This is Jonathan Pierce. We met yesterday, when you helped me with my tire. Margaret grabbed Caleb's free hand, eyes wide with disbelief. Yes, sir. How did you get my number? I made some calls, Jonathan replied. Contacted Westbrook High, described our encounter. Your chemistry teacher, Ms. Grant, confirmed your name. She speaks very highly of you. The room spun around Caleb. Ms. Grant had spoken to a billionaire about him. Sir, I just found out who you are. I had no idea yesterday. Jonathan chuckled softly, genuine warmth in the sound. That's exactly why I knew I chose the right person. Chose the right person? Caleb repeated. I've been thinking about you all day. What you did yesterday reminded me of something I'd almost forgotten. When I was your age, my grandmother told me, faith without works is dead. Who you are is proven when no one important is watching. Caleb's breath caught. Those were almost the exact words Margaret had been telling him his entire life. But here's the truth, Caleb. Someone important was watching yesterday. I was watching, and I saw a young man who chose to help a stranger instead of guarding his own future. Sir, I just did what anyone should do, Caleb said quietly. No, Jonathan said firmly. You did what very few would do. Ms. Grant told me you missed your final chemistry exam to help me. She explained how critical it was for your scholarship applications. Caleb closed his eyes. Of course, Ms. Grant had told him everything. Yes, sir. That's true. And you don't regret it? Caleb looked at Margaret. She nodded, her eyes shining. No, sir. I'd do it again. There was a pause on the line. When Jonathan spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. Do you know what you've done, son? You've reminded me why I went into business. Not to build wealth, not to create an empire, but to create opportunities for people like you, people of character. Caleb's heart pounded. I've been searching for someone to help me with a special project. Someone who knows struggle but also has the vision to give back. Caleb, I'd like to offer you a full scholarship to Ohio State University. Tuition, room, board, a living stipend. In exchange, you'd work part-time at Pierce & Co. The words hit him like a tidal wave. Full scholarship. Ohio State. Everything he had dreamed of. But Jonathan wasn't finished. That's just the beginning, son. I want to build a new training center in Westbrook, a place where young people can learn automotive and engineering skills. And I want you to help me design it. Caleb nearly dropped the phone. Margaret grabbed his arm to steady him. Sir, I don't understand. Why me? Jonathan's answer would stay with him for the rest of his life. Because yesterday morning you had every reason to keep riding, but you stopped. You helped. You refused payment. Most importantly, you treated me with respect. Not because you knew who I was, but because that's who you are. And then Jonathan said something that changed everything. My grandmother raised me too. Caleb, yesterday you showed me that her lessons are still alive in your generation. That gives me hope for the future. Within 48 hours, Caleb's life would transform so completely that his biggest challenge would be learning to accept the unbelievable. But first, Jonathan explained exactly what he had in mind. Tears streamed down Caleb's face as Jonathan continued. There's one more thing. Caleb. I've been searching for the right person to eventually lead community development at Pierce & Co. Someone who understands what it means to struggle, but also has the vision to help others rise above their circumstances. Margaret was crying now, too, her hand pressed to her mouth in disbelief. I think that person might be you. Caleb looked around their small kitchen. The patched ceiling buckets, the worn-out furniture, Margaret's carefully stacked bills on the counter. In a single phone call, everything was changing. Sir, this is more than I ever dreamed of. Good dreams should always be bigger than you can imagine, son, Jonathan replied. That's what makes them worth chasing. Jonathan's tone shifted into business, but the warmth never left his voice. Here's what I'm proposing. My assistant, Catherine Mills, will contact you tomorrow to begin arrangements. The scholarship covers everything: tuition, fees, room, board, plus a $2,000 monthly living allowance. Caleb's mind reeled. $2,000 a month, more than Margaret's entire Social Security check. You'll be enrolled in Ohio State's Accelerated Engineering Program, 3 years instead of 4. During the school year, you'll work 15 hours a week in our Community Development Division at $25 an hour. Summers, you'll be full-time at the same rate, with a housing allowance if you choose to live near our downtown offices. Margaret whispered a prayer of thanksgiving under her breath. Caleb tried to do the math, then gave up. It was more than he'd ever imagined earning. But that's just your personal opportunity, Jonathan said. Let me tell you about the bigger picture. Caleb could hear papers rustling on the other end. We're converting the old Westfield manufacturing plant on Maple Avenue into a state-of-the-art automotive training center. Do you know the building? Caleb knew it all too well. It had been abandoned for 8 years, a scar on his neighborhood. Yes, sir, I know it. $5 million for the renovation and equipment, Jonathan continued. We're going to create something Westbrook has never seen before. Caleb sat down heavily, the weight of it pressing on him. The center will train 200 students annually. Automotive repair, electrical systems, small engine maintenance, even entry-level engineering. Full certification programs leading directly to jobs. Margaret squeezed his hand tightly. She was already thinking of the young people in their church, their block, their city who needed exactly this. We'll partner with local high schools for dual enrollment, Jonathan explained. Students can earn college credits while learning practical skills. A pipeline from education to employment, sir. This sounds incredible, Caleb said. It gets better, Jonathan replied. Every graduate will have guaranteed job placement. We're partnering with auto shops, dealerships, and construction companies across Ohio. Starting wages of $18 an hour minimum. $18 an hour. Double what most people in Caleb's neighborhood earned. And Caleb, I want you involved from day one. Help me design the program. Make sure it serves the community the way it should. Caleb's mind was racing. Sir, could we add small engine repair? Lawnmowers, generators, tools. Practical things people here could use immediately. Excellent suggestion. What else? Maybe a mentorship program. Pair students with mechanics and engineers. And a scholarship fund for students who want to go on to 4-year degrees. Jonathan was quiet a moment. When he spoke, pride laced his voice. You're already thinking like a leader, son. All of that goes into the plan. Then Jonathan dropped another bombshell. There's one more person I'd like to bring into this project. Is Mrs. Turner available to speak? Margaret's eyes went wide. Caleb handed her the phone with shaking hands. Hello, Mr. Pierce, she said, her voice trembling. Mrs. Turner, your grandson changed my life yesterday. Now I'd like to change yours. I want to offer you a position as community liaison for the new training center. Margaret nearly dropped the phone. Mr. Pierce, I'm 72 years old. Ma'am, Jonathan said gently, wisdom doesn't have an expiration date. These students will need someone they trust, someone who understands their struggles, someone who can guide them, not just through technical training, but through life. Margaret looked at Caleb, who was nodding, his cross glinting under the kitchen light. The position comes with full health benefits, which I understand you need. Salary of $40,000 per year plus performance bonuses. 40,000? Margaret whispered. More than she'd ever earned in her life. I don't know what to say. Say you'll help me build something that will change this community forever. Margaret closed her eyes, overwhelmed. A whispered prayer rose to her lips. Yes, Mr. Pierce, yes, I will. Outstanding. My assistant Catherine will contact you both tomorrow with all the details. As the call wound down, Jonathan left them with one final message. Caleb, I want you to keep that ring. Every time you look at it, remember that kindness has power beyond what you can imagine. What you did yesterday will ripple through Westbrook for generations. Thank you, sir. For everything. No, son, thank you. You reminded me why I do this work. When the line went dead, Caleb and Margaret sat in silence at their worn kitchen table. Finally, she spoke. Baby, do you realize what just happened? Caleb looked down at the Harvard ring dangling beside his cross, then at his grandmother's tear-streaked face. I think we just witnessed a miracle, Grandma. No, baby, Margaret whispered, her eyes shining. We just witnessed what happens when you live the values of your faith. When you choose character over convenience. That night, as Caleb lay in bed staring at the cracked ceiling, he thought about the morning that had changed everything. 20 minutes. One flat tire. One choice to help instead of hurry. And now, everything was different. But the best part? This was just the beginning. 6 months later, the changes in Westbrook were so dramatic that national news crews came to cover what locals were calling the Pierce effect. And what they found restored faith in what's possible when one act of kindness becomes a movement. 3 months after that life-changing call, Caleb walked across Ohio State's campus in his engineering jacket. No longer the exhausted teenager pedaling an old bike, but a confident young man with a mission. On his dorm room wall, the Harvard ring sat in a frame beside photos of Margaret and their neighborhood church, a daily reminder of where he came from and where he was going. His professors noticed something different. Caleb doesn't just design solutions, Dr. Martinez told colleagues. He designs solutions that work for real people. Back in Westbrook, the transformation was breathtaking. The old Westfield plant on Maple Avenue buzzed with life. Where rust and broken windows once stood, a bright blue sign now read, Westbrook Automotive Training Center. Opening day drew news vans up and down the street. Margaret, now in a professional blazer with community liaison on her name tag, cut the ribbon beside Jonathan Pierce and the mayor. In just 6 months, reported local journalist Sarah Chen, the center has enrolled 127 students. 92% have secured jobs within 30 days of graduation. The numbers told one story, but the faces told another. Tyler, Caleb's best friend, now specialized in hybrid engine repair. "Never thought I'd be working on Teslas," he said, grinning. Oil-stained hands holding a complex part. Maria Alvarez's older brother, Carlos, was learning welding, already juggling job offers from 3 construction companies. His starting salary, $22 an hour, and Kesha Johnson, a young single mother, took evening classes in small engine repair while her daughter played safely in the center's on-site childcare. "For the first time, I can see a future," Margaret told a documentary crew, her voice steady but her eyes shining. But the transformation went far beyond the training center itself. Margaret had become the heart of the program. Students lined up at her small office not just for paperwork, but for encouragement, prayer, and sometimes just a listening ear. Her walls were covered with thank you notes and scripture verses students had slipped under her door. "Mrs. Turner helped me believe I could do this," said Anthony Walker, 19, now an automotive technician at a downtown dealership. "She reminds me of my own grandmother." Mr. Hanlon, the old neighbor who once showed Caleb how to change oil and patch a tire, now stood at the front of a classroom as head instructor for small engine repair. "Never thought I'd be teaching in a real school," he admitted to his students. "But Caleb showed me that experience matters as much as education." The ripple effects were staggering. 3 new auto repair shops opened in Westbrook, all staffed by training center graduates. Local unemployment dropped from 23% to 11% in just 6 months. Property values rose by 15% as working families returned to the neighborhood. Mrs. Lewis's corner store, once barely scraping by, now stocked tool belts and work boots alongside groceries. "The whole place feels different," she said. "People have hope again." The story caught national attention. CNN's education correspondent aired a feature, The Westbrook Model. Experts nationwide began studying it as proof that investing in people could transform entire communities. Other companies took notice. Ford Motor Company announced a partnership with the center. The local credit union introduced special auto loan programs for graduates. Westbrook Community College expanded its engineering transfer program. At a packed town hall, Jonathan Pierce announced Phase 2. "We're partnering with Dayton State University to provide 4-year engineering degrees, fully funded for graduates of the training center." The audience erupted in applause. During his summer breaks, Caleb worked as assistant director of student services. On his office wall hung a framed copy of his scholarship essay, The Weight of Gold, What I Learned from a Stranger on the Highway. Students sought his advice because they knew he'd walked the same road. 2 years ago, I was washing dishes and patching bicycle tires, he told them. Now I'm designing sustainable automotive systems. The only difference is that someone believed in me, and I chose to believe in God's plan. Meanwhile, Margaret started hosting Wisdom Wednesdays, informal sessions where she shared life lessons, how to shake hands firmly, why showing up early mattered, and how to turn setbacks into comebacks. The blessings touched even their personal lives. Margaret's arthritis medicine was finally covered by excellent insurance. Their little rental house was repaired and modernized. No more buckets to catch the rain. But they stayed in Westbrook. "This is where we belong," Margaret said. "This is where God wants us to do the most good." Delegations from Detroit, Birmingham, even London visited to study the Pierce effect. Jonathan laughed with reporters. Who knew changing a tire could turn into foreign policy? HBO greenlit a documentary, The Ring, a story of faith and community. But the most important transformation couldn't be captured on camera. It was in how a community saw itself. "We're not just surviving anymore," Tyler said, now a certified hybrid engine technician. "We're thriving," and it all traced back to one choice, Caleb choosing to stop. What began as 20 minutes of kindness had become a legacy that would echo for generations. 2 years later, on another brisk October morning, proof came that kindness always comes full circle. Now a junior at Ohio State, Caleb drove his reliable Honda down the same stretch of Route 35 where his life had changed. In the distance, the Westbrook Automotive Training Center gleamed like a beacon of hope where abandoned factories once stood. Through his windshield, Caleb spotted something familiar. A car pulled over. hazard lights blinking, and a figure standing helplessly beside it. This time it was a young Latina nurse in scrubs, clearly heading home after a long night shift. Without hesitation, Caleb slowed, pulled over, and stepped out. The irony wasn't lost on him. It had all started with a stranger on the roadside. And now, it was his turn to pass it on. He was at the exact spot where his life had once changed, now in position to change someone else's. "Excuse me, miss," Caleb said, stepping toward the stranded vehicle. "Looks like you could use some help." Meet Sophia Reyes. She worked nights as a nursing aide at Dayton General, supporting her younger siblings while taking community college courses. Her old sedan had picked the worst possible moment to die. "I don't have money for a tow truck," she admitted, embarrassed. "Don't worry about that," Caleb replied, popping the hood. "Let's see what we can do." Minutes later, he found the problem. It's a simple fix: corroded battery cables. With steady hands and tools he now carried everywhere, Caleb tightened the connections and wiped the grime away. As he worked, Sophia mentioned her dream of becoming a registered nurse. Caleb smiled. "That's beautiful. My grandmother always said the best careers are the ones where you serve others." When Sophia tried to pay him, Caleb waved her off. "Just pay it forward sometime." Instead, he handed her a business card. Westbrook Automotive Training Center. On the back, he'd written, "Sometimes the most important exchanges happen between strangers on highways." Meanwhile, back at the training center, Margaret, now 74, led her evening community circle. That night's theme: how one moment of kindness can change everything. She didn't know her grandson was out on Route 35, living the very lesson she was teaching. Sophia's car roared back to life. As she drove away, Caleb's phone buzzed. A text from Jonathan Pierce. "Saw you on Route 35. Couldn't be prouder." The circle continued, voices rising in prayer and reflection. That night, Caleb placed the Harvard ring in a glass display case at the training center. Beneath a plaque engraved with his grandmother's words, "Character is who you are when no one important is watching." Rain began to fall. Just like the morning, everything changed. Caleb got back into his Honda, knowing that somewhere in Westbrook, another young person was sitting at a kitchen table, writing scholarship essays, dreaming of impossible futures. The next morning, Sophia enrolled in the center's Saturday workshop for healthcare workers. 6 months later, she was teaching her co-workers how to handle basic car maintenance. A year after that, she opened her own budget-friendly repair shop for working families. Some stories end, others begin new chapters. And somewhere tonight, someone else is pedaling home in the rain, about to face their own Route 35 moment. The question is, what will they choose? The story you've just heard isn't just entertainment. It's proof that your next choice could change someone's world. Every day we face crossroads like Caleb's. We can keep moving, or we can stop. We can make excuses, or we can make a difference. Caleb's 20 minutes of kindness created jobs for hundreds, transformed a community, and inspired a movement. But it all started with one decision: to see a stranger's need as more important than his own comfort. Tomorrow, you'll face your own Route 35 moment. Maybe it's helping a coworker, encouraging a struggling student, or simply treating someone with dignity. The size of the gesture doesn't matter. The choice to care does. Share this story with someone who needs to believe in the power of kindness. Like this video if you're ready to be someone else's miracle. Subscribe if you want to see more proof that faith and compassion still shape lives. Because somewhere tonight, someone is cycling home, praying tomorrow will be different. Maybe your act of kindness is the answer they've been waiting for. What will your tire-changing moment be?